And we're live. Hot boy Hert, yo, what is up?
What's going on, man? How are you guys?
Chilling, man. Your cup of coffee's ready?
My coffee is ready. I got my creamer. I'm good to go.
Sweet, sweet. So I guess, dude, there's a lot to talk about, but I guess I'm just gonna start it off by, you know your story better than anybody else, and I don't feel like it's my place to be saying what has happened to you. So I guess that's my question. What the hell has happened to you? Like, it's been some insanity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's weird because this has been going on now since 2009, really, like the whole situation. So, um, I've talked about it a couple of times. Like I did an article in Mass Appeal where I kind of detailed where I was at in 2013, and I just actually did like a video. It's like a 10-minute. It's going to be like a 10-minute long video or something like that. That's mostly filmed inside my studio, where I kind of catch people up on what's going on. So, like for fear of being redundant, I've gone over the whole thing, like the whole like 11, 12 years or whatever it is, several times. But I think you know, for listeners who don't know, I was sentenced to prison time for graffiti in 2010, and I've been on parole. I'm still currently on parole, and the reason that I'm still currently on parole is because I owe, an outrageous amount of restitution, basically. And those are like kind of the key, most important things for new people that don't know the situation. Everybody though, I would like everybody to see the video when it comes out, because I really dig into the details of violations cases that I've had, or, just how it's affected my life and stuff like that. So I don't want to be repeating myself too many times or whatnot, but if you guys got specific questions, I'll answer those.
Yeah, I guess one of my specific questions is, so I know that in 2008, right, is when they raided your crib.
Yeah. Wow. So taking it back. Yeah. 2008. I moved, I moved out to Pittsburgh. Basically, me and Atak are from Buffalo. I started painting when I was like 14 years old or something. And then by the time I was 18, we had kind of heated up things in our hometown. It's a small city. One of our close friends, this kid that writes Obvious, caught like a felony case, and they kind of just fry graffiti writers in small towns. If you're painting a lot in your hometown, and people know you, that could happen. So I moved to Pittsburgh. He moved to New York. I'm talking about Attack now, and I painted there for. I think I lived there for a total of 8 months, and then got raided in 2008, and which eventually led to my conviction, which is all circumstantial evidence, unfortunately.
And when they raided your crib, before this, did you have any graffiti arrests or no?
Yeah, I had one arrest when I was 16, and it was for graffiti. All of my arrests actually I've only been arrested for graffiti. I have one, shoplifting charge. I think I got caught stealing a pair of sneakers or something like that when I was really young. But besides that, only graffiti charges.
So before the raid, so the raid was your second time being arrested for graph.
Yeah, I believe so, actually. Or I might have had, it's interesting to say arrested for graph, because like I had been arrested for like a trespassing charge or something like that, but like it wasn't the raid. Also, I guess it's kind of weird. I didn't get arrested when I got raided. They came and they raided my apartment and they took everything, and they were like, we know where you work, we know your home address in Buffalo. We've already talked to the police in Buffalo. Like, it is what it is. We're going to talk to you in the future. But they had an investigation going, and also these aren't like the brightest, sharpest cops in the world. You know what I mean? They're the ones that are covering graffiti cases. So I think that they just had a weird, unique way. Like they must have just been like, we don't have all the evidence to charge him right now, but we could go raid his crib. I want to go meet the guy, type of thing. You know what I mean? Like they're those types of cops are just weird cops.
Yeah. So you were 22 years old when you were sentenced to prison?
I think I was 21.
21. How did you feel at that time? Like, I can't imagine someone at that age is like, that's the beginning of their life. What did you even think about that?
Wow, that's an interesting thing to say. The beginning of life at 21. I feel like I don't know. I sort of feel like mine began a little bit earlier than that, but
Mm-hmm.
it is very early. You know, I didn't know the impact. Like looking back at it now as like a 33-year-old man, I didn't know the impact of what was happening while it was happening. And I didn't really understand, you know, the intricacies of like the legal system or anything like that either. So I was poor. I didn't have support at the time. I mean, I had support from friends. Like, I don't want to say that I didn't have like loving people in my life or anything, but you know, just as in terms of like money, like I just didn't have the money to really deal with what had happened or what was happening at the time. But I mean, I could tell you about what the feeling is like when when the gavel comes down and, you know, you walk into, or the cuffs go on and like, that's it, you know, it's a very surreal feeling. You know, I remember like walking down into the first cell that they put me in, and like, I was wearing like an all black suit. Cause I didn't really know how to like dress again. Like I'm a poor kid. Right. So I like tried my hardest to dress fly, but I was wearing all black. And I remember like walking into the cell and like everybody else was down there. And some of these guys are here. They're here for all different reasons, you know, but people started clowning me for like dressing like a waiter basically. And I was like, you know, I had just, they didn't know what my situation was. They didn't know that like, you know, I hadn't even spent like longer than like a couple nights in jail before that. So they didn't know that like I was fearful. They didn't know that I was like, you know, sad. They didn't know any of that shit. People were just like, yo, did they just pick you up like working at a restaurant or something like that? And I was like, it's just weird. You're just kind of like, all right, this is happening to me. I'm just going to address the situation in front of me. So I had to address like people like kind of cutting up and just kind of start relaxing as much as I could. I was like, this is it for the next year. So I don't know. We'll see what's next.
Yeah, that is something else, man. When they rated, so when like going back to the crib thing, you weren't the lease that you had on it, your name wasn't on it, right?
Nah, my name wasn't on it.
So
How'd you
how
know
did
that
they?
actually?
It was in some interview or something. Like I did my homework, but
Oh,
how did they go about finding it?
nice,
I know
nice.
they did they did a stakeout on you. What?
Yeah. So if your name isn't on a lease, all the police have to do is they have to prove that they don't even have to prove that you're a resident. They have to prove that you come and go there. Actually, this is kind of one of the things that has to do with the Breonna Taylor case. They just kind of watch your crib and see what's coming and going. They could watch, you know, how many packages you're getting. So for me, what they did was they just, I guess, parked somewhere on the street. Somebody did, and watched me come and go for 3 days to prove residence. I read this in one of the police reports later on, and that kind of blew my mind. But again, like, you know, these are just kind of loser cops. You know what I mean? Like they're who would do such a thing really with their time? Like that's pathetic. But at the same time, you know, it I guess that's what they had to do to prove it. But for other writers, they should know. You know what I mean? Just keep your eyes peeled. I guess don't be too paranoid, but also like, this is so uncommon. This type of thing doesn't happen in a ton of cities. It was really like an isolated incident, I feel like. So like even me giving advice to other writers about how to avoid arrest. I mean, shit, like don't paint in Pittsburgh in 2009. That just happened to be the year that, you know, they sentenced me and Daniel Montano, and it happened to be the only two times that they sent graffiti writers to prison, even since, you know, like my situation is just unique because a lot of graffiti writers that you talk to have been to jail or they've been to prison. Some have even been to prison for graffiti. But as far as I know, you know, I have the longest, harshest sentence just for the nature of that crime. You know, I've talked to like, I met GK and talked to him about it. You know, I know like I know a couple other writers who have gone to prison for graffiti, and I've talked to them, but you know, none who are like, oh yeah, I also had, you know, 11 years of parole after and 60 grand in restitution. So I don't even know how I got on that off of that question, but
I was gonna ask, like going into the prison system for your charges, you know, for graffiti, being around like rapists, murderers, all these people that are in there for such heinous crimes, how did you feel? Did you have feelings of regret, like it wasn't worth it, or did you love graffiti so much that you just accepted the consequences in a way?
I mean, at the time, I still, your relationship with graffiti changes over time. You know, like when I was preparing for this interview, I listened to as many of the other graffiti writers that you had featured, and I was listening to Nove's interview, and I was listening to how he was saying like your relationship with graffiti changes over time. So however, you know, the graffiti writer views it and what they tell you it means to them, that's how it feels for them at that time. And you could be like, you know, the Rorschach or the Freud for that and figure out how they feel. Like today, how I feel about it is so different from then. But I do remember like, you know, being in prison and I still like writing to graffiti writers, talking to them on the phone all the time, making plans for when I get out, you know, like drawing graffiti still. So I loved it. And like, you know, a part of me will always love it. But at the time, like I definitely, I don't have any regrets. No, like I didn't do anything different than a lot of people who didn't wind up in this situation, you know? And like graffiti is a crime like no other, you know what I mean? It's not a crime that you do because you're seeking financial gain. You're not like doing it out of desperation or something. It's motivated, you know, you're actually trying to communicate with a community of people like other graffiti writers to get positive attention. Like it's not, I know that, you know, for a lot of people, a lot of writers try and like front all hard and stuff like that. But at the same time, like you're artistically expressing yourself and hoping that other people look up to you, you know? So like nothing that I did was motivated from a dark place. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure I at that age, I was working out a lot of pain that I was going through in general, but what I was doing wasn't dark by any means. It was you know, it was motivated kind of in a way by the same things that motivate other creative endeavors that I've taken on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That yeah, you hit the nail on the head with the comment of the fact that people try to front all hard and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, what you're doing is it is a creative endeavor. It does involve communication. It is a social thing in a way. And
oh yeah, I
that's
mean, sorry, not to interrupt, but just real quick, like you know, I was locked up and one of these guys was talking to me about how like, you know, a diss that people would use against each other in prison was calling somebody studio. You know what I mean? Like just meaning that, you know, you'd rather be trying to rap, you know, or maybe you'd rather try and play basketball or you know, like something like that. So like, oh, that dude's not street, that dude's studio. You know what I mean? So like there's a whole thing, like, you know, people who like the rappers that we listen to that are rapping, you know, obviously it's all for show, it's all for entertainment. At the end of the day, they're actually trying to get positive attention, and a lot of them use the money that they get to do positive things too. So it's not really like, you know, graffiti, the whole idea that it's like these angry people all the time, man, it's fun. You know what I mean? A lot of people are out there trying to have fun and trying to build upon a tradition, and you know, they care about learning about history and all these things. I mean, a lot of these guys are quite they're sensitive guys. I mean, yo, honestly, like that CH's interview, that was amazing. You know, I would put that up there with like that's like my second favorite graffiti interview that I've heard so far. Like he's an amazing storyteller. He's a intelligent person, and like he epitomized like a culture in a way where like, I mean, definitely shout out to CH. That interview was dope. And like one thing that I got to say too about him, because I think he was kind of talking about how, you know, you're painting 1 minute and then you're forgotten the next. I don't think he needs to worry about it. You know what I mean? And that goes for any of the writers that you guys featured too. Like I hope like all those guys know, like their legacy is cemented. You know what I mean? Like and I can't speak for all of graffiti, obviously, but there are people out there such as myself where even if I'm not painting, I'm listening, you know what I mean? I'm watching, I'm paying attention. And, you know, the efforts that they put in, the sacrifices they've made. And like, you know, a lot of these guys have really paid their dues, you know? And like, I hope that they don't feel a pressure to continue to do that. You know what I mean? Cause like CH is dope, man. That's king. That's legendary status for sure. And
yeah,
same
absolutely.
goes for literally everybody that you guys have interviewed. Like, it's like, the roster is wild, you know, so shout out to you guys too.
Oh, thank you so much, man. But like what I was saying is that it's just nuts, man. It's like you said, it's a crime like no other, and it's really not that big of a deal. And you found yourself serving more time in a more expensive case than that cop that you were in a shared a jail with.
Ooh.
and he was
Yo, you did your homework, man.
of course, man, always. Like he was like if I remember correctly, he killed somebody because he was drunk driving. He killed a young man, and he didn't get caught until 2 years later because
Yeah.
the partner that he did the crime with had a guilty conscience. So he turned him in, and he was doing less time than you, and his bail and all that, and his restitution was less than you. And what did you do? You painted on the surface. You added a surface to another surface. It's insanity. It's insanity that everything that's happened to you, and it's just absolutely insane, man. The one-off case, the making an example. It's like make an example out of that fool, and it's
So
just
yeah. Again, I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt. There's so many like things flying around in my brain that I want to get out to you while you're saying this. But like, a lot of people have this reaction when they hear my situation. You know, especially because I'm I'm a white dude, but I'm not like a white boy from like the streets of Brooklyn. Like everybody else that's come on here. I'm like a white guy from like, kind of just boring, like poor middle class. Like there really isn't too much to even say about, where I'm from. The crime rate's not crazy high. It's not, we're just blue collar, boring, whatever, small town. So like the people that I'm around, when I tell them, details of my life, it blows their mind. But I think that for me, one thing that's helped keep me in check to not always be feeling like, why me? You know what I mean? Like my life's so bad. I just listen to other people because everybody has struggles, not to be cliche or whatnot, but if you listen to even the guys that you've been interviewing, man, I probably have the easiest life out of all the writers that you've interviewed, except for maybe, I don't know, like listening to Jess, his life sounds pretty dope, but everybody else has shared like their struggles, and like I'm like, wow, man, dude's getting stabbed, going to prison multiple times, dealing with alcoholism, depression, like OJ's childhood, like all of these things that I was listening to. I'm like, man, even though I'm a felon and I went to prison and I'm on parole and I owe all this crazy amount of money, life could still be more difficult, and everybody has their challenges that they deal with. So I've never kind of adopted the mentality of being like, why me? I just try and look at like the things that I've got going on that are positive in my life. I have some amazing friends. You know what I mean? I've had, a beautiful girlfriend who supported me like throughout the situation. Like I mean, I have a studio now. I make paintings. Like I wake up in the morning, I get a smoothie every day. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, there are elements of my life that are very challenging, but I just try and kind of focus on the positive things and, try to think about, I'm always thinking introspectively, you know what I mean? I'm always analyzing, like, my mind is open to maybe the fact that I made mistakes or something in the past, and maybe it's my responsibility that bad things have happened, or maybe this is just a plan. You know what I mean? I've even been just considering the idea that there's a plan for all of us. You know what I mean? I'm always like kind of trying to keep my mind open to, cause and effect and the balance of things. And, but in general, like my day-to-day demeanor is I'm a happy person, despite like kind of these challenges. So I don't know. Sorry to go off on that tangent, but
Nah, dude, we really appreciate that, honestly. Like, I want to go back to what you said, how, a lot of people do go through things. And it's not only, the guests that we have on or the people you see on TV talking about their stories. It could be people right next to you, your close ones, your family, relatives, I remember a few months ago, I had an intense mushroom trip, and I was sitting in my room. And what happened was I was putting myself in the shoes of people around me, close family members. And what mushrooms does, it enhances everything you feel, and it makes you think things you normally wouldn't in like the hustle and bustle routine of your daily life. So it slows down. And what happened pretty much was that, like, I literally looked at like my cousin, for example, or my mother, and I thought about their life and what they've been through, and it literally made me like break down in tears, because people go through so many things. And we live in a society where vulnerability and speaking about, who you are, what's on your mind, or what's bothering you genuinely is not a common practice, and that's how people have all this shit built up, and they
it's
just
changing. It's
Dude.
changing though. I feel like,
Yeah,
over
yeah.
the last, even like, I'll try to keep this kind of like, just to keep it down to earth. I'll try and stick to graffiti just because, If we expand out and talk about everybody in general, it's just going to be way too much to cover.
Mm-hmm.
But if we were to just talk about just from like, you know, graffiti writers, bro, years ago, like there wouldn't be these hardcore bombers coming on a podcast and like spilling their heart. You know what I mean? This is new, you know, so this is a change that we're witnessing now. This is why, like, you know, when I was coming up, man, like everybody was inaccessible, but social media changed that now. Like, you know, everybody's got to be on social media because they're seeking the attention. They got to be on there. There's very few writers that aren't, you know, so like everybody's always just a message away. And you know, everybody's kind of putting their face out there now and doing stuff like this. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, we're going to learn more about each other over time. I think it's actually, in a way, a positive, you know, effect. And I think people kind of talking openly, it can't be a bad thing. You know what I mean? Like the problems that are usually caused between like individuals or groups of people are usually rooted in their lack of understanding of one another. You know, so the more you become familiar with other groups of people, their struggles, like that leads to positive change.
I think what we're lacking is a sense of community. There's a lot of division going on nowadays, you know, with everything that's going on. And I feel like this podcast or us speaking about these things, believe it or not, people could be 40 years old and they never heard people speak like this before, you know? And like you said, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think being genuine, passionate about life is very important. You know, I think that's what makes it worthwhile, because a daily routine everyone follows, but, you know, talking about stuff that really matters, you know, not everyone's comfortable with that. And I think we should, you know, as people,
Yo,
you know,
I've met very few graffiti writers that aren't passionate. You know what I mean? Like you got to have that. You got to have some other things going on to like really go all out at any point in your life. But I've met very few that are just, you know, oh, there isn't anything going on inside this person. You know what I mean? So I think that as a total, like the community is pretty, you know, open to getting to know one another again, you know. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm kind of distracted too. I'm like looking for like a lighter right now because I feel like having a smoke. But
It's all good, bro. How was your time in prison like? What was your daily routine when you were in prison? What was your fear like when you were entering into that prison system, having not been in one like that before?
yeah, my daily routine, I had it pretty down pat. You know, for the first couple of months, you go through this thing. It's a classification process. You know, it doesn't happen if you get like a county sentence. Then you're pretty much just going to go upstairs and. But for prison, you gotta go through a quarantine period, and then you gotta go to a classification prison that everybody within the state goes through. So I went to Camp Hill in Pennsylvania. Anybody from Philly who's ever done a bid has been there too. So I went through there, and then eventually I went back to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh is where I did the majority of my time. My day-to-day routine, I had it down to pretty much reading, writing, and working out. You know, like I had never really been that disciplined before. I like was able to monitor kind of how much text I was covering. I mean, reading is an excellent thing to do, and I wish I could do more of it now. And I understand why people don't have the opportunity to do it out here because life moves so fast. But I was covering at least, you know, 100 pages of text, and some of it was very dense stuff. You know, like I went through like some of the old classics. I did Crime and Punishment, you know, by Dostoevsky. I actually read Moby Dick. If anybody has ever read Moby Dick, you know, it's basically like reading the Bible. You know what I mean? Like I would read a page and then I need to sit back and like really like soak it in. Like, wow, whoa. And then just wrapping my head around the fact that Herman Melville like had the time to do that. Like, you know, he cultivated the talent to put that out and then actually took the time to write that book. So I feel like, you know, it was actually a time for growth for me. And I also learned a lot about myself and about people. Like, you know, prison, the whole stigma about it, it's the same thing with graffiti. We all front like we're hard. So the world, you know, thinks that graffiti writers are hard, right? Same thing with criminals in general. They front like they're hard. Everybody at the end of the day wants love. Like these motherfuckers are still, you know, want somebody to come visit them. You could be the hardest motherfucker in jail, but like I'm getting more visits, you know what I mean? Like and everybody wants that, you know? So like Shit, I forgot what I was even talking about.
We were just talking about your daily routine in jail. You were reading. You were, people. There's a stigma in prison that it's this one thing, just like graph is just one thing, but it's really not necessarily just that.
Oh yeah. So basically, like, I mean, I could tell you my actual daily routine. I still remember it. Like, I'd wake up, go to breakfast, come back to the cell. For the first like 2 hour session, I'd go out to yard. I mostly wouldn't work out in the morning just because I don't know. It's just I would like to like kind of let myself ease into the day. But I would just walk around the yard, catch up with different people, go back to the cell, chill there for like an hour or so, read. We'd come out for lunch, go back to the cell. And then for the second yard of the day, I had it worked out where I convinced my cellie to leave because he was a little scared. He was an older dude. He really didn't like coming out of the cell too much. But I was like, bro, I need some alone time. You know what I mean? So like we settled on the middle of the day. So he would go out to yard and I could totally actually talk about all this stuff now too, because the prison that I was in is closed and everything, and like nobody could come at me for it. But I had tricked out my door to the cell so that when the COs would come around and try and close everybody in after yard, like basically you make the decision, either you're going to go out to yard or you're going to stay in the cell. But whatever happens, they're going to come around, they're going to close all the gates. So they would come around and they would close my gate, or they thought, and like I had stuffed something in there and it sounded like it was closing, but it wouldn't close. And I would open it up and I would come out. And also there were always workers, right? So like inmates who, for whatever reason, want to work for the state inside prison. And actually, I shouldn't even be disrespectful like that. Some of them are working for like 15 cents an hour, saving up to buy a television for their cell because they're doing a 20-year bid, and they're doing it by saving 15 cents an hour. So actually, mad respect to some of these workers. But I would pretend like I was a worker. I'd come out of the cell and I would just like walk around in the yard, or walk around in the day room, make sure that none of the COs like were going to be sweating me. And then I would go and I would take a shower privately, you know what I mean? Like without a million people in the showers and stuff. And then I'd come back to my cell. I'd put my robe on. I had a little bathrobe. I had a TV on, you know what I mean? So I'd put on CNN and I would roll up a cigarette. I'd smoke a cigarette in the cell and I would be like, wow, here I am. Like, it's just a tiny little shitty apartment or something like that. You know, I'm alone. Like, you're rarely ever alone in prison. You know, you're always surrounded by people. So like that middle of the day, that was just, that was my time, you know? And then obviously my cellie would come back, then we would go to dinner, and then we would have evening yard. I'd usually work out at evening yard, come back to the cell, have a protein shake, and then I would read until I passed out. And that was every day. You know what I mean? So like, I still remember that to this day too, you know, like I just got in my routine. Like I did a lot of reading and writing, you know, people would socialize with me. Everybody, like the other thing too is, you can't hide from people in prison. You can't hide who you are. So, you know, if you're a fucked up person, if you're a rat, if you're like, whatever you are, whatever you were before you came in, that is going to show. And like how you survive in there is based on who you already were before you came in. So for me, it was like, I'm not the hardest guy in the world, you know what I mean? But that's not the only thing that you need to survive. Like you have to be intelligent. And I sat back and thought about it at different points. And I'm like, I might not just be the smartest inmate in this prison. I'm probably smarter than the fucking warden of this jail. So really, I should be able to run it in here while I'm in here. And like, dude, weighing 120 pounds, I was able to like run a store out of my cell. You know, we collected on debts. I had people that would hang out with me that would do that for me. You know, I moved weed from like groups of people who didn't talk to other groups of people. You know, like I like settled things like politically with people. I did tattoos on people. All of this shit, never got caught for any of it. You know what I mean? Because I was just like, wait a second, I'm the type of person that I represent, right? Like there's so many different types of graffiti writers, right? Like if you go through and you look at all the interviews you did, you've got guys from different neighborhoods, different times, different types of approaches to graffiti. Like the type of dude that I am is I'm an out-of-towner with a fascination with New York City 90s bombing and culture. You know, I saw the movie Kids when I was like 14 years old and was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be that, you know? So like I moved to New York or whatever, and I traveled around and I painted, but I went from, you know, walking down Bedford Avenue, getting a vegan slice of pizza, to being locked up in prison. You know what I mean? And that never really happens. So if it does happen, like if there's anybody out there who is of the same kind of, has the same kind of background, or is maybe like in my group of friends who winds up in that situation, they don't need to fear it. These are human beings in prison. These are regular guys who were just pushed to do something extreme by the circumstances of their lives. They're not just all like fucked in the head. You know what I mean? Like they all had struggles, but people commit crimes generally for two reasons: out of desperation, because they need money, or because it was a passionate, heat of the moment, like poor decision that they made. Right. Mm-hmm. So like, if you have control of your mind and you don't generally do things like that, like just make a decision that, you're not going to just fly off the handle and kill somebody, then you're probably not going to wind up in prison. And like, I think that society in general just needs to understand that these men in prison and these women in prison are no different from other people out here. That whole stigma should just go away. Like, the prison system should be abolished, period. Right. But one of the steps that we could take towards, because they're not going to do it straight up, it's making too much money for them. But one of the steps that we could take towards like, towards that in that direction would just be like understanding first that these men and women, they shouldn't have that stigma, that scarlet letter, like I understand, I relate to poor people and real deal criminals, because I've now like, broke bread with them, spent time with them, grew up with them, like, and that's the one kind of like really big takeaway that I always try to share with people is like, yes, prison is scary. You know what I mean? Like, I saw violence, things happen, but I'm not going to come out here and front like you can't survive it. I'm not going to come out here and be like, yo, I'm extra hard. I'm harder than the next dude because I went to prison, because that's stupid. Like, it's not something I'm proud of. It's something that happened, but it's also something that, I took the opportunity to try and learn from. And that's kind of something that I just would want to share with people. I'm still trying to find a lighter, by the way. I've been like walking around the studio looking for a lighter that whole time.
Yo, man, I got so much to say about everything you just said. The first one, I'm just going to start from the beginning of that little thing. Yeah. So the first one is the whole reading thing. When you were reading in prison, you were reading books like Moby Dick, Crime and Punishment. People don't understand that stuff is mind expanding, and it's the classics for a reason. And like books like The Count of Monte Cristo, or like The Picture of Dorian Gray, Moby Dick, all those classics, it's not like people look at it and because it's like you're told to read it in school or whatever, they're like, that's corny, or I don't want to do that. But one thing I know,
sorry to interrupt real quick. Oscar Wilde did some time too, right?
I can imagine that dude. I mean, writing The Picture of Dorian Gray, you have to be mentally insane to think of that.
Yeah, and like Jean-Paul Sartre also spent time in prison. I mean, Dostoevsky, he produced memoirs from House of the Dead based on time that he spent in prison, which was the result of a sentencing because he had read like an essay or something that he wasn't allowed to read because the Emperor of Russia would get pissed. These are legends right here. Like these are guys that, anyway, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No. Well, that segues perfectly into what I was going to say, which is that when you have some time alone and a break from your daily routine, which that's happened to me in my life a few times, where something will like drastic will change and I have a total shift in the way that I'm living, and it causes me like a little bit of social isolation in some sort of way. And you start changing your habits and you do things like read and you do things like work out, that it changes your mindset completely, especially like I said, if you're reading, because you're intaking mind food. The problem with the reason that people don't read in today's society as much as I think that they should, I don't think it's just because of that everyone's in a rat race. I definitely think that's part of it, but people have time to, how much money does Netflix make with their subscriptions? They have time. It's not that they don't necessarily have time. You make time for what you want, but we live in a microwave society. People want things quick, and to stay, people can't even finish a single book, even if it's mad interesting, because their attention span it's not there. It's not their fault. It's just that with TV and YouTube and all these things, it's so easily digestible. Why use your eyes and your brain to process words when you can just sit there and like lurking Instagram while an audiobook plays in the background, or like a YouTube video or a movie? So there's that. And then
there is that. Go ahead. It's a good conversation, man. Keep going.
All good, bro. I'm just wondering, you you say that you weren't the strongest or the toughest, the hardest, whatever, in the prison system, and like you said, you don't have to be. I was just recently reading *Sapiens* by I don't know how to pronounce his name, so I'm not going to say it, but he just talks about how it's not like, just in history in general, the strongest people are not the ones that run the thing. Most of us are run by people far weaker than us that we could physically overpower.
Sure.
Lawyers, politicians,
Just
people who
women in
like,
general, man. Like women in general. The WNBA is not. Man, I'm gonna get canceled for saying this, but the WNBA is not as fun to watch as the NBA. That doesn't
Mhm.
mean that they're not proficient athletes. That doesn't mean
Yeah,
that their contributions throughout history shouldn't be paid attention to. Like sorry, go ahead.
it's all good. And in history, it's not the physical specimens that prevail. The biggest land mammals on Earth all went extinct very rapidly a long time ago. So it segues into, how did your life change and how did your mentality change? Not only being in prison and having a change of lifestyle, obviously, but when you got out of prison and you're like, you can't own a marker, bro. You can't go to the supermarket without
Well,
asking
I
them.
can. I can now. So actually, I should
Oh yeah,
clarify that from like 2011 to 2013, when I was violated for making a painting, I wasn't legally allowed to own or possess art making materials. That was a special condition of my parole. But when I moved to New York City in 2015 for the second time, when I moved to New York, their parole offices, they're busy. So they weren't like, oh, this graffiti guy's coming in, we got to make a special condition for him. They were just like, whatever. So that condition went away. So like,
mhm.
currently I am allowed to make art if I want, which is great.
Yeah.
But sorry, I forgot what else you were
Yeah,
talking
well,
about there.
basically, my question was, there was a time period where you couldn't own markers, you couldn't own chalk, bro.
Yeah.
You couldn't
Yeah.
go to the supermarket without asking them. You couldn't drive a vehicle. You couldn't own a cell phone. You couldn't be anywhere that you weren't contactable by landline phone. Ridiculous,
You
bro.
got it.
So
Yeah, you got it. I
how
mean,
did that?
I still have the 9 p.m. till 8 a.m. curfew. I still can't leave the county. That's why we're doing this over Zoom. Like my life is still impacted. And I think I know what you're getting at, is basically like, you're asking how has this changed my life? Right. Like
Your
the
mindset in your life, yeah.
yeah. So it greatly impacts, like being on parole impacts every decision I make. It impacts my day-to-day life, heavily. And I try to be mindful of how it could negatively impact me, like how it could make me angry or sad. And I try and mitigate that, so like it's made me more conscious, more aware. A lot of people deal with FOMO, the fear of missing out, when they look at Instagram and they compare their lives to others. I've had to learn how to manage that, because I'll be honest with you, man, I don't really have any friends that are on parole. Daniel Montano, MF1, you guys might know who he is. He was the only person who I could talk to, who truly understood what I was going through on a day to day. But what it has done overall, like it's opened my eyes to being able to live life outside of being a graffiti writer. It was, being a graffiti writer was my everything from age 14 to when I was 21, when I got locked up, and it's still a big part of my life to some extent. But I've now learned to kind of appreciate other things. So, like for example, what one of the first people that actually, and it was just like by random chance, one of the first people who was on my phone list was this guy Ned Vena, who is a successful artist. And like I got him on the phone and he was like, hey, I just want you to know that you, just because you're locked up doesn't mean that you don't have a voice, doesn't mean that you can't still create. You could make conceptual art from prison if you wanted to. And before that, I didn't even know what conceptual art was. I didn't know that there was a whole field of art that was based on ideas and not so much the artist's hand being involved in the work. So I started reading about it. And before I went to prison, I wasn't into fine art or any other types of expression, really. I listened to music always, but I wasn't aware of it to an extent. And I wasn't disciplined enough to sit down and read that much. I had read in high school. I was fortunate enough to go to like, a school that was a magnet school, which gave me a solid foundation to build on. And that is a huge advantage and a privilege that a lot of other guys in prison do not have. We're talking the average education level of a prison inmate is like 6th grade. And you got to keep that in mind when you're dealing with people in there too, because they'll flip out over a cookie. You know what I'm saying? So like you got to understand you're dealing with 6th graders who are in the body of, a 30-year-old man fully well built. You know what I mean? So like, I think, but the main thing that it's done for me is it's just humbled me a lot. It's made me disciplined, and it's made me heavily consider the potential consequences of my actions. So I've never had a problem with alcohol. I've never had a problem with drugs. I try to eat healthy. And these are all things that a lot of people struggle with. And I think that it's in a way it's been an advantage. But I say that with some hesitation because I don't think that prison is the answer for anybody, and I don't think it's rehabilitative. I think the decisions that I made on my own as a result of like incurring these challenges are what kind of led to it. But I could have gone to prison and it could have done terrible things for me. Honestly, it could have made me a worse criminal. That officer that you mentioned, his name's Donald Breeden. And I only say that because I want people to look it up. They could Google it and like verify my whole story that I've talked about him. That dude, when we were in the cell together, at late at night, you talk to your cellie. That dude was trying to get me to like do cocaine runs for him and shit when I got out. So like I could have, if I didn't have other opportunities to make money when I got out, maybe I would have considered that. Maybe I would have been like, damn, I could make $5,000 by just picking up a car and dropping it off and not asking any questions. Maybe I should do that. So like prison is not an optimal choice to rehabilitate an individual. In fact, the chances of it harming that person are way greater. But for me personally, I've just been very, very considerate of things ever since. And, I'm not going to say that I haven't had hiccups along the way. I've had violations cases. I've been, I went back to jail again. And like, I though it was for doing a painting, it's still at the end of the day, like I knew that the condition of my parole was that, you can't own or possess art making materials. And I went ahead and I did it anyway, so like I look at things now where I'm like, okay, I heavily consider things. If I'm driving in a vehicle and somebody gets in, they're like, yo, you care if I have this beer? I'm the type of guy now where I'm like, actually, why don't we just chill for a little while? How about you finish that before I start driving? You know what I mean? Because and not because I think that them having a beer is wrong. Like it's just because what could potentially happen. And I always struggled with that growing up. I always felt like, I wanted to resist authority. So I always wanted to kind of do things against the grain. But you can do those things for sure. And maybe if you just abide by certain rules and regulations for a time, then when the time comes and you could strike, you could make it so much more meaningful. Like I've been going to these protests and everything, and I wanted to participate. You know what I mean? And personally, like I wanted to take things to a higher level, but I had to sit back and really think to myself, like, I'm not even supposed to be here. Like I'm on parole. Like, I don't know. I've had my officer, like it's a small town. I've seen my officer just on the streets before. You know what I mean? So like, I'm like, I really got to watch what I do. And I think about it a lot more. And I think about the people that are close to me, how my decisions impact them. My mom, um, my girlfriend, like those, my friends, like those people, like I think about them when I'm doing things now. And that's something that, I didn't do as a young man. As a young man, it's just, you're just focused on yourself, like pretty much alone. And so that's how it's impacted me.
No matter what you go through, you just realize that everything's like a stepping stone to more knowledge, to being at a higher level. So, bro, they say in June 2020, 2.12 million people were incarcerated this year in the prison system in America. From what you've seen, like people, do they talk about bettering themselves? Have you met people that have motivated you to think this way, or did you do this mostly on your own in there?
Honestly, like you know, other guys who I've met through the system are dealing with struggles that go deep. You know what I mean? They go very far back. And one thing that I was thinking about is, you know, I've met guys who grew up in households without running water. You know, who who did not have an education, who never even who didn't finish high school. You know, and so the challenges that they face are far greater than just being able to wake up one morning and be like, you know what, I'm gonna do right today. You know, it's like they're the demons that they're battling, and it's collectively like our responsibility. It's all of our responsibility as a society to try and address those ills, so that we don't continue to have people that are unfortunate like that. Like we should care for one another, and you know, I think that I don't even know where I'm going with that. I mean, just like it's been my personal journey, but it's different from everybody else's, and I'm super aware of that. So like along the way, most of the people that I've met who have imparted, you know, wisdom or knowledge, there were some inmates for sure, and whether they knew it or not, they were sharing things with me. I mean, actually, there was one guy in particular who I wanted to shout out in this interview because I wonder if like there's anybody in Pittsburgh that might actually know this dude from the street and could get me back in touch with him. So I'm just gonna throw it out there or whatever. But his street name is Diesel. I don't want to actually say his government name on here, but he's from the north side of Pittsburgh. So if anybody in the north side of Pittsburgh is listening and you know who Diesel is, you know, tell him I'm doing this podcast, tell him I'm doing all right, and try and get me in touch with him. But this dude was the largest, you know, most dangerous black dude on D Block, you know, probably in the whole prison, to be honest with you. But he and I worked together in the kitchen for a while, and he was also like a very sensitive person and a very expressive person. He was comfortable with himself because he was the biggest dude there. You know what I mean? So like he didn't fear anybody, and he didn't even get bothered by like, you know, at one point I had a cellie who was like in a subset of the Aryan Brotherhood and shit. And like he would ask me for tattoos all the time, and I was not trying to do them. But, you know, Diesel went and got me a tattoo gun and had it dropped off to the cell. And he was like, yeah, you could tattoo him. Like, go ahead. You know, he stopped by the cell and asked to see the tattoos. And he was like, oh, cool, looks good. Like, he literally was so unbothered by this dude's racism, you know, because he was so comfortable with himself and not threatened by this little white angry man. You know what I'm saying? So like his kind of the way that he carried himself taught me a lot. His openness to me, to talking to me, the way that he would come to me and he'd be like, man, I like talking to you because, you know, you're different. Like you understand, you think about shit. You know what I mean? And I was like, wow, we're kind of like overcoming these imaginary boundaries between us, right? This is a legitimate street crip. You know what I mean? Like lifelong career criminal. And again, just to review, I'm a white boy who, you know, worked in a tattoo shop in New York and, you know, would like just like chill with my friends who are all like graphic designers, tattooers, and artists. You know what I mean? Like we come from totally different worlds, but he was able to see something in me and I was able to see something in him to where we became close. So yeah, you know, certain people I've met, they've impacted me in positive ways. Sometimes I'll see people and I'll learn from their experiences or what they've done in a negative way. Like I'll see what they did and I'll be like, okay, I shouldn't do that. You know, there was a guy who I met who, you know, he did like a 17-year bid. He got out and like a week later he went and robbed a store and came back for another 20-year bid, you know? And like, I looked at him and it was just like, man, you know, I do not want any part of that. Like, so, you know, definitely keeping your eyes, your ears open, listening, you know, listen to people who consider, you know, that's another thing Nove said, consider the source. You know what I mean? Where your information's coming from and how much you're going to let it influence you. You know, the people who raised me essentially, because I didn't have like a father figure in my life or whatever. So honestly, a lot of these graffiti writers were like a dad to me. You know, when I was really young, I think I read Nove's book, Nove York, when I was like 16 years old or something like that.
Which one?
And the first one, I think it's just called Nove York, right?
Okay, yeah.
The one that's like black with the yellow text on the front of
Yeah,
it.
that's New York, written by a slave.
Yeah. So I read that book when I was like 16, and like I let that book influence me big time. Like, you know, I was like, I want to be like this. I want my life to be like this. You know, I think I went and did acid like after that book, you know? And like my experience with acid was way different than his. Like he was talking about how it opened up his mind and all of this stuff. I got stuck on acid for 24 hours and like straight up thought that I was permanently damaged and wanted to like kill myself if it went on any longer. Like you know, so you got to consider the source, consider yourself. Every body is different, you know, physically and mentally. So just be aware of that type of stuff. And I allowed graffiti writers in a way to like raise me. But then, you know, I got to a point as I was becoming a man where I started kind of taking a step back and being like, okay, you know, consider other sources. Like, and that's not to say that Nove isn't a great source to consider for influence. He is. You know, he's gone on to be with other things that he's done. Actually, if you don't mind, I kind of want to tell a story about that dude, if that's cool.
Yeah, for sure. Run it, bro.
So like, he was talking about some like kind of big like murals that he did that were influenced by subway art or whatever. And like, it took me back because I think it was like 2009 or 2010. But me and Kuma were painting at the time, and he hit me up and he's like, yo, I got this spot in Carroll Gardens that I want to hit. And you know, and I knew where it was. It was right off the Gowanus. And I was like, yeah, let's go, you know. So like, this was back before everybody started using those telescopic ladders, but we had one like way early. And he was like, all right, I checked the spot out. There's cameras on it though. So I think what we should do is we should blow up these rafts and like float down the Gowanus to get there. That way we'll be, you know, we won't be seen. And I was like, wow, this guy's crazy, man. Like, I don't want to fucking blow up a raft. And I definitely don't want to get in the Gowanus because it's disgusting, right? But I went and I checked it out myself. And I'm like, bro, I think I'm just going to walk past the cameras. And he's like, all right, well, that's on you then. You go do that. And I was like, all right, meet me at the spot. So I go and I walk, you know, past the cameras and I get to the spot and I'm there and I call him on the cell phone. He's blowing up the raft. He's like a mile upstream or whatever. And I'm like, yo, I just got here, man. I'm like, yo, bad news. Like, this spot, if this is an illegal mural, which I think it is, this is like the sickest illegal mural I've ever seen, you know, since I moved to New York. It was like the Hand of Doom, but it said Joan of Arc. And it was perfect, man. Like this thing, like, I couldn't think of who would have done it. I was like, maybe like Freedom did this or something, but that, you know, he doesn't paint outside of the tunnels. So I was like, I don't know who did this. Like, who could be responsible for this? But I was like, yo, man, you don't understand. This thing is sick. And Kuma was like, well, we got the paint. We're already there. I'll be there in a minute. I need your help anyway. And I'm like, all right. So he floats on down the Gowanus. He gets there. And like, I lift him up out of the water or whatever. And we're looking at it. And he's like, yo, this thing is, this is amazing, you know? And I'm like, man, I wonder, you know, what should we do? Like, there's this dilemma, right? Like of spot jockeying and like crowning people and shit. And our plan was to do a bubble letter back to back across the top of the whole thing. That's what we had planned before this mural was ever there. And the debate was, should we still do this? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yo, honestly, man, like we're here, we got the paint. Like, honestly, like I want to be in this flick. You know, when people are coming here to take photos of this mural, I want my shit in there. I don't know who did this or if how they're gonna feel about me being up in the flick, but whatever, you know what I mean? It's graffiti, so we did it. And I came back the next day and I took flicks of it from like, you know, the Smith and Ninth elevated train stop, and I was like so happy. I went home, and then Kuma called me the next day and he was like, "Yo, did you hear about the spot?" I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Our shit got buffed." I'm like, "All of it?" He's like, "No, just the ones that were right above the mural." And I'm like, damn. And then like I got a call from somebody else and they were like, yo, Nove did that. I was like, fuck that. You know what I mean? Like that sucks. Like now I know I pissed off, you know, one of my idols. Right. And I was a little bit salty that I lost the spot, but I totally understood why he did it. I was like, man, if I came back the next day and saw anybody went over me, unless it was like JA or some shit, I would want that shit gone. You know, like I don't like when people crown me. And yo, just so other people know, like I see motherfuckers crowning me. I see y'all, you know, and I do not appreciate it, but whatever. So he obviously buffed it, or some of his people buffed it or whatever. I ended up putting out a zine. This was early with that dude Carnage. Me and Attack did, I think, the first zine that Carnage ever did. And in the middle of it, when you flip to the middle, I used that photo with our shit running before it got buffed. And me and Nove had a mutual friend. I think he was in Europe at the time. I sent a copy of it to him, hoping it would get to him. And inside I wrote, you know, at least I got my flick, with a little smiley face, like kind of like a peaceful gesture, like, hey, you know, like I hope you're not that mad, you know what I mean? And then like I heard like a couple years later that he was going to speak at some event in Red Hook. And I went to it, you know, with one of my young homies and this kid Shark from Queens. And I showed up, and all the people that were in the audience, they weren't even, I could tell they weren't graffiti writers. This was not a graffiti meetup. These were people who came, you know, not to see Nove. They were there to see Dumar Brown speak, you know? And like, I listened to his whole thing. I recorded a little bit of it. I felt it. And then I kind of hung out. He was doing a signing afterwards, and I waited until everybody else went. And then I walked up and I came up and I introduced myself, and he stood up and he was like, I didn't think you would come here. And I was like, oh shit. Like I thought he was going to pop off for like a split second. And then he was just like happy. Like he was just like, yo, he's like, I fuck with your shit, man. He's like, you're one of the only people that's got a good tag, a good fill in, a good bubble letter, and a good piece. You know what I mean? Like, and I was just like, yo, that is not what I expected, right? Like that, like I expected him to just be like, who are you? I never heard of you. You know what I mean? But he was like genuinely excited to meet me. He actually asked some random dude who was there, probably one of his boys or something, to take a photo of us. He's like, yeah, we should take a photo together just in case, document this in case one of us dies or something. And I'm like, dude, this is crazy for me. And, you know, we only chopped it up for like a minute. Like he had so many other people to talk to. He probably felt super, super good. He had just, you know, done his thing. Everybody was feeling it. So I took off. And when me and Shark walked out, I was talking to Shark and I'm like, yo, you see what happened there, bro? I was like, that's the best thing that I could have gotten out of this whole graffiti experience. That's what it was all for right there. You know? So like, if you're going to dedicate yourself to this shit for real, like just know that that's the best possible outcome, is meeting one of your heroes and them acknowledging your efforts. You know what I mean? So like big shout out to him for like, you know, doing that, and like, for continuing to do what he does, man. Like I'm going to read his other books. I read like 2 other books of his. I reread Nove York like years later, and it just didn't hit the same. You know what I mean? I'm glad that I read it when I read it, because I was so young, but like, I would like to kind of see what he's working on now. And, you know, other writers should kind of note from his experience that you don't have to limit yourself. You don't just have to go be a graphic designer, a tattooer, or even a fine artist. You know, you could go get a PhD in Berlin. You know what I'm saying? Like there's so many different other opportunities. So, you know, special shout out to him. I just wanted to share that story because it's a good one, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, The World Screams Nove, that book is revolutionary. That book is amazing. Anyone who hasn't checked it out, it's kind of hard to get a hold of, but when he came here, he blessed it with a copy of pretty much all of his books. And, you know, I've been reading them and stuff. That The World Screams Nove, it's, you know, it's not what people would think it would be about, but if you have an open mind, you should definitely check all of his work out. And you were saying how he said that you got to consider the source. And from talking to him in person and also reading his book, something that I note of him is that he does make references to notable historical figures, about how, you know, it doesn't really matter who tells you what, you have to go and verify it for yourself. And I think I think that's something very powerful, especially in this day and age with everything that's going on, and really having an introspective mind to really check, am I actually considering the source? Like, did I just see this somewhere and now this is in my head? And since it's the cool thing, or maybe the like hip thing or whatever to think this way, am I thinking about it because of that? Or have I analyzed all of the factors? And is this why I think this is, am I considering the source? And it could go anywhere from going to check out a spot yourself because, you know, Kuma said it was valid, but you want to see or whatever with the camera, to even just, you know, just like modern day masks work, masks don't work, vaccine yes, vaccine no. Like, you got to check everything for yourself, bro. It's very powerful. It's a very powerful statement. And
yeah, I mean, that's true. That's territory that I'm like, yeah, like I don't even know if I want to get into that, because time will tell. You know what I mean? I don't really know how this is gonna go, and I definitely don't have a stance with regards to like COVID or anything like that.
Yeah, of course. I was wondering if you think that in America specifically, the justice system is, I guess, I guess, like for lack of a better term, like infallible, in that they claim justice and or they proclaim justice and they proclaim like, you know,
Nah.
that
Yeah,
you're
nah,
innocent until
nah. I
proven
mean,
guilty, but yet you're, in your case, you pretty much have a one-off case. Your rights were completely stripped of you in a level that they would put a cap on your own creativity, on something that
right.
clearly is doing no harm to anyone. So really the only essence to doing that would be sort of like a vengeance, like a malicious punishment. Like, I know this isn't going to make me feel like me act like physically or my well-being better. I know that it's not going to make you better. It's just going to make your life a little bit tougher. So I guess I'll do this. And it really has no negative effect on anyone but you. Um, and you know, you making art, if it's just, you know, like especially the conceptual art, the fine art, the stuff you were doing with like close-up tags, like a little portion of it, unless you knew that that was from that person's hand style, you wouldn't know that that's what it was from. It just looks like
Sure.
some art. uh you making that, it's not going to negatively affect anybody. So what's the problem of you doing it, especially if you're already within the confines of your own home, you're already
Right.
abiding by all of these rules? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, to answer the original question, right? One of the most important words that you said there was the American judicial system, right? So, like, I can only speak really with regard to, like, the the Pennsylvania and
Mm.
Pittsburgh, like Pennsylvania State and Allegheny County judicial system, and Erie County and Buffalo's judicial system. That's where my experience is limited to. So I can't tell you about America in general, and I definitely can't tell you about it compared to the rest of the world. I know that there are obviously other places in the world with way worse systems than ours, but like, is it infallible? Definitely not. Is it corrupt? For sure. Are there mistakes happening every day? Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Like, and you talk to anybody, any lawyer, you know what I mean? Even any judge. Like, I mean, shit, you watch Law and Order or whatever. All it is moral and ethical quandaries that people have to battle of, like, you know, should we follow the system or let this child rapist go? Like, the problems get very, very complicated, and there's so many layers. And can this system that we have in place manage those problems? I mean, this is the best that we've come up with so far. Does it need reform? 100%, without a doubt. Without a doubt, it needs major reform. And anybody who just like thinks that it's working, like, for you can ask them the follow-up question. If there's anybody out there who's like, yes, I believe in the system, I believe in justice here, and I believe it works, and I'll fight for it and stuff, check their experiences, see if they grew up poor, see if they've ever had to commit a crime, see if they know anybody who's gone through the system, you know what I mean? Like, because they haven't. Like, and that's what I was talking about earlier, is like, we would benefit from becoming more familiar with one another. Like, that's what I'm talking about right there, is like, in a way, I'm grateful for my experiences, because now, I go and I do work, with inner city kids and stuff, and I feel comfortable in any setting. I feel comfortable in the hood. I feel comfortable in prison at times. I felt comfortable, because I feel connected with those people there the same way that I feel connected with anybody else. Sometimes, honestly, I've been in situations where I'm in a very wealthy person's home or whatever, and I feel more uncomfortable. So, like, I think just like devoting some time and attention to being open and empathetic. If people could practice empathy, like, the world will just be a better place. And then we're going to stop feeling good when we're watching the news and we're like, oh, I'm glad they put that motherfucker away, and like, people that are close to me, I'm not going to put people down who say stuff like that either. I don't want to, cause like, I'll talk to my mom sometimes. She'll watch the news or something like that, and she'll be like, oh, I'm glad that they did that to that guy. And I always sympathize with the criminal. I'm always like, yeah, but did they? Yeah, that's not going to help him out. Why did he do that in the first place? You know what I mean? Like, I think like that, and that's because of the experiences that I've been through. My mom hasn't been through those experiences. Do I love her? Yes. Do I think that I want her to go to prison so she has the same enlightenment? No. You know what I mean? I just try, on a micro level with each situation to tell people, like, consider empathy. This is a human being that we're talking about. These are years of their life. And like, not to just focus on myself. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I just always try and consider other people's situations too.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yo, I mean, at some point I do want to share some, like, just like old school, like, I just want to share like a graph story or
Yeah, for
something like
sure.
that at some point.
Let
We
me
can't
just address
we
what you
can't let the
said.
interview. Yeah.
Yeah, let me just address what you said, and then you got the mic, bro.
Lit.
I just wanted to quote NM, and we were talking to him last week, and he was saying how growing up, he learned that experiences themselves could be the greatest teacher. And I think that what you said about how what we need is to be like more connected as humans so we can have a better understanding. To have a better understanding, you need to be taught in a way. You need to have an experience with this certain thing. And there's so many things that it's difficult, but luckily the way humanity moves is towards more connection with each era. Like back in the day, there was just, if you lived in another country, you'd never hear a single idea from someone across an ocean. It would just be impossible. But with what we have today, just like with this podcast, I'm sure there's gonna be people who listen to it who have never listened to a writer before or anything like that, and have never listened to someone who's gone through something like you. And you can hear from the person's voice and with this kind of platform that you're not just like what the stigma would portray someone who went to prison for X amount of time would be. So I think that that's something positive that's coming out of everything that's going on. And yeah, bro, say whatever you want.
So, I mean, just to build on what you just said real quick, though, that goes both ways too. Like, my parole officer, for example, he has to deal with the fact that I come in his office to report to him, and I am a nice guy and I am intelligent. I actually went back to school during this time that I've been here, and I went and got a business degree with, when I graduated cum laude, 3.8 GPA. The only reason it wasn't a 4.0 is because I got locked up in 2013 and had a 0.0 GPA for that semester and still had to pay out of pocket for the whole thing. So like, when my PO sees me come in there and it's like, all right, this dude just did better, at school than probably my PO did at school, and he's a very nice guy. He's met my mother because he comes over for home visits. He's met, or hasn't met my girlfriend, but he's basically been around. He knows my life, right? And he is like himself. He's like, I can't believe that this is still going on with you. And I want to be like, man, like, you just haven't taken the time to get to know your other parolees, because their situations are just as unfair in a lot of ways. Like, just because I have the same color skin as you, you know what I mean? And I can talk nice and stuff, and like, whatever, like, you don't look at me like this dirtbag piece of shit. Like, you look at every other parolee, right? But like, it's just that lack of understanding, that lack of familiarity that allows, ignorance to breed, which then begets hatred and begets racism and begets like all of these things that are the ills in our society. So like, I enjoy that, my situation challenges people, so that I get to be the one to say things like, yo, don't just write off everybody that's a felon. Don't just write off everybody that's on parole because you like me, right? Like, I'm a nice guy, right? Am I the only felon you know? And most of the time, yeah. You know what I mean? So like, in that case, it's like, well, stop, like, just mislabeling, prejudging people. Like, it's stupid. But yeah, I don't know, man. I wanted to tell a graffiti story, but I don't actually just have any off the top of the dome. Like, I guess I just want to like make sure that I definitely shout out Attack, obviously, for he basically being a big brother to me. Like, he's just a couple years my senior, but like very early on, when I was like, I would run away from home and like stay in his apartment in the beginning, you know what I mean? And like, he taught me like kind of everything about bombing, taught me a lot about life, and shout out to Lions too, another big brother of mine who kind of blessed me with style. You know what I mean? Like, I heard you guys address kind of the each one teach one type of mentality of graffiti, and how that goes down. I came up, thankfully, like within BF crew. Like, I actually haven't heard Lions' interview because I don't know if you guys dropped it yet, but I know like, because I know him, I know he's going to talk about the traditional elements of graffiti, you know, and his opinions are really solid about it. So coming out of like kind of being raised in a way, both like in terms of like my life and just my approach to graffiti by those two guys, you know, I feel like I was set up to excel very early on. Style is a whole nother thing about graffiti that we could talk about for days, you know what I mean? But basically, like, I was a toy. I'm still a toy, but you know, like, I was really, really toy for a while. And then, like, you know, I was talking to Lions on AOL chat, and he sent me an image of a sketch and was just like, you know, draw this until you can paint it. And I did, and it was like the turning point. It was like from there, like, I understood how, you know, you need to bite. Like, if there's any young graffiti writers, aspiring graffiti writers, stop trying to think that you could invent the wheel. First, try to see if you can actually draw some shit. Like, to this day, like, you know, I've been drawing graffiti for over half of my life or whatever. But to this day, I'll sit down sometimes and I'll look at like an old school, like, blade, or an old school, like, you know, mare or scene, or it's actually scene shit always makes sense. But some of the weird shit, quick, like, for example, draw a quick piece and see if you can make sense of it, you know, because then you're going to understand like another element. It's like all types of training, you know, and you start appreciating different styles and stuff. So shout out to Lions for kind of opening that up to me, and Attack for teaching me basically how to get away with graffiti, because I did not get caught doing graffiti, you know what I mean? Like, it was all like a case was built on circumstantial evidence. I've been arrested 2 times in my life, like, for graffiti on the spot, and that was once when I was 16, and, you know, one time when I was like 18. But I did not get charged for writing the word that they say I'm known for, you know. So, like, I got away with way more than you know, I ended up getting caught for, and that's all you know, the impact that Attack had on just teaching me how to paint. So definitely shout out to both of them. And then I have to, you know, make mention of Daniel Montano, MF1. I really hope that, you know, listeners go and research this guy, because he was a very beautiful person, but also just a very talented artist that, like, and because he went through his situation in a small city like Pittsburgh, the reason that I have like attention on me, like you guys were saying, a bunch of people, you know, shared the story or whatever and like responded. The only reason that I'm getting that attention is because I went and I painted in New York City, and that's like the mecca of graffiti, and everybody's paying attention. But it's not like that in small towns. So, like, Daniel Montano slayed Pittsburgh several times. He painted way more graffiti than me, and he's a way better graffiti writer, but he wasn't up in New York. You know what I mean? So, like, people don't really know about this guy. Prolific writer, prolific artist. And, you know, unfortunately, he passed away, but he did 7 years total in prison for graffiti. Longest sentence in United States history. And his story needs to be told. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and unfortunately, I don't have the time right now, but that's part of my goal. Part of my goal is to try and gain a platform so that I could talk also about Daniel Montano and what I learned from him. So just, I hope people look, you know, to him. And then obviously, you know, rest in peace to Acne. He was one of the first dudes who I linked up with when I moved out to New York. He was opened his doors. Like, I mean, I don't even need to speak on his behalf, because he influenced and impacted so many people in New York. He's just part of New York history. People know, you know, Josh was a good dude, and that he always looked out for everybody and stuff. So rest in peace, Acne. And now the story just came to me. I want to talk about Zexor for a second, because I want to draw a connection here for anybody who's into like graffiti history or whatever. So I moved to New York in 2009, I think, or I don't know. I can't remember the dates too well, but I was there like around that time. And I was living in first down in Ridgewood, and then I moved to Bushwick. And, you know, obviously you want to go get the money spots. So I used to scope out rooftops in Manhattan. That was my goal. I just wanted to hit all of the virgin runner roofs, you know. And writers, please go find virgin spots. Stop going over people or crowding. All the shit looks corny. Go try and do something on your own. You see, you know, people that do that, they'll be remembered. Nobody's going to remember how you have a tiny little fill-in on a wall with like 40 other fill-ins, you know. But I would look out for those spots, but then I also wanted to paint in the hood that I lived in. You know, even though like Bushwick at the time was just getting crushed by kids who, no disrespect, like I looked at most of them as toys. You know, I felt like stylistically I was on a different level, and I want to present my graffiti, you know, in Manhattan, right? So that was it. But I was also like, yo, fuck it, like it's some herb shit to only be doing that. You gotta paint in the hood that you're in. So I went out one night, and you know, I painted on some dead tracks. Come back a couple nights later, and Zexor had gone over it, you know, for no reason. I'm very careful not to step on any toes. I don't, if I'm in somebody else's city or something, I don't go over any graffiti, because even if it's toy, you don't know if that person's dead. You don't know if that person's locked up. You don't know shit. So like, just as a general rule, go find a spot that nobody's painted. There's tons of surfaces that haven't been painted. This is common logic, and I wish more kids thought this way. But, you know, I painted the spot. Zexor went over it. I didn't really know anything about him. I went and I fixed the spot. I went out another night, and I'm walking down underneath that elevated line on Broadway, and I see this big husky kid walking towards me, and I'm like, oh shit, me and him are the only ones on the block. We both have book bags on, you know, and like, New York is the only city that I've ran into writers on the street. You know, it doesn't happen where I'm from because there just aren't that many. And I'm like looking at this kid, I'm like, I wonder if he's a writer. But either way, this is a big ass motherfucker, and I'm like worried a little bit, right? Like, I'm like, should I cross? If I cross, he's gonna know I'm soft. So fuck it, I'm gonna stay on this side. So I'm like, I'm walking towards him, and we pass each other. We look at each other. We pass each other. We walk about a block apart. I turn back, and this dude stopped, just staring at me from like a block away. And he's like, yo, what up? And I'm like, what's up? And he starts walking towards me. And from a distance, I'm like, yo, are you cool? You know what I mean? Like, yo, are we good? Are we good? And he's not saying shit. He's just walking towards me. And I'm like, fuck, should I run? You know, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to run. I'm just going to, fuck it. I'm going to take this loss, whatever. And he like walks straight up to me, and we're like 2 feet away. And he's like, yeah, you write what you write. And I was just like, I write Hert. You know what I mean? I just put it out there. And he was like, oh shit, I just went over you. I write Zexor. I'm like, yeah, I know, actually, I just fixed that spot. So, you know, what's up? What do we do now? And he was just like, honestly, man, I seen your shit, and I went online and I saw that you were from out of town, and I'm from Bushwick. You know what I mean? And I seen you coming here getting shining, and I don't want you to be shining like that. He just said that to me, like, just straight up, like, I don't want you to be shining. And honestly, part of me respected it. Like, part of me was like, yeah, that's right. I'm not from here. You're from here. You know what I mean? Like, and I was like, he's like, but real talk. He's like, I just wanted to paint with you. And dude, so many people beef just because they want to paint with you. You know what I mean? But that's neither here nor there. We immediately put it to bed, and right away he was like, let's go paint. So we're like bombing along Broadway or whatever, and like had a fantastic night, you know, ended up becoming good friends with him. And like, oh, and I forgot to mention, this is an important part too. We're walking down the street, we're getting to know each other. We're talking in between, like catching tags and shit. And I'm like, so how long you been writing? You know what I mean? Like, why do you write? Like, where did it come from? And he's like, oh, well, my father used to do graffiti. I was like, oh shit, where did your father write? And he's like, ASP WTO. And I was like, yo, that blew my mind, because get this, man, ASP WTO back in like the late 80s or early 90s. My boy Tilo could probably verify all this, because he came out to Buffalo. He was like dodging a case or something like that. And he came out here to cool off. And he came to the west side of Buffalo, which at the time was a little bit rough. And he linked up with this whole like little contingency of Puerto Ricans in the west side, and he put them on to graffiti. He started telling them, you know, come to New York. They all went to New York, got gold fronts and shit, came back to Buffalo and just started bombing. And they did it with style, you know, because ASP had dope style. So he put all these writers on and essentially started the graffiti scene in Buffalo. Of course, there was like, you know, a lull after that, like where like, you know, the late 90s, not a ton happened until, you know, Lions and Merc Jr. and like, you know, Attack and a couple other people like started coming out and doing shit, you know, Spade, BF, shout out to Spade, like shout out everybody in BF, I got to represent. But, you know, ASP started graffiti in Buffalo, and like without ASP doing that, there's a good chance, actually, I know for a fact, I would never have started writing graffiti. And, you know, there I am in 2009 walking with his son, with Zexor, and he's showing me this tattoo of ASP he's got on his chest. And, you know, that it's moments like that are like, so crazy. It makes the world a small place, but it kind of showed me that I was on the right path. You know what I mean? I was like, when I was young, I would go online and I would watch state your name videos, and I would watch old interviews. You know what I mean? Like, just like wanting to be a part of that, and like connecting those dots. That was my goal back in the day, and it definitely happened. So I ended up linking Zex up with a bunch of the homies, and then he did his thing, and became a legend in his own right. And like, rest in peace to Zexor as well, and anybody else who's passed away. It's unfortunate. We got to stop, taking losses. I mean, and definitely give people their flowers while they're here. Like, that's why, not to take it back again, but like, CH, man, like, I got mad respect for you. I appreciate everything you've done in the game, and everybody else that's doing this. Even the writers that aren't so talkative, that don't do podcasts because maybe they're just quiet people or whatever. I see you and I appreciate what you've done. Like, Atak is probably one of the most productive people in the world that I know. He's never going to do a graffiti podcast interview. You know what I mean? It's just everybody approaches things differently. But all of those contributions that are made, those are impactful. It's not about fucking likes. You know what I'm saying? It's not about retweets, reshares, whatever the fuck. Like, graffiti is an organic subculture, and you get out what you put in. So if you're real and you put in good effort, I've gotten respect from people like Jest, when I met him, very respectful. Nove, when I met him, when I was locked up, I got a letter from Revs. You know what I mean? That's crazy. Like, it's like, the respect and the love that I've gotten from the graffiti community. I mean, like me doing this podcast, I haven't done graffiti realistically on the street in like a decade. You know what I mean? I've been isolated. I was in New York in 2015, and I was living in an apartment with a bunch of other graffiti writers, and I felt like I was like still a part of the community. But since I've been back home, isolated. I don't talk to graffiti writers. I don't, sometimes occasionally we'll shoot a DM back and forth, but realistically, man, I'm off the radar. So for me to pop out and do a little podcast, and for people to care, like, that's love. I hope that we could just use that and transfer it, and I hope that people like develop and pay attention to the other contributions that people are making. Like, people are doing beautiful things within visual art, within and within writing. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know, just yeah. I need another cigarette.
Yeah, man. Honestly, wow. That's all I can say about everything you just said. Very inspirational. Honestly, man. Like, I have immense respect for the people who come from Buffalo and do their thing in New York, because they do it really well. And I'm not even just saying that because I'm talking to you right now. They do it really, really well, and it goes without saying. You guys, it's kind of like, it's strange. I don't want to say like a different.
Sorry to interrupt, but a lot of them suck too. We do have to, you got to be critical. Like,
Mhm.
I studied New York graffiti. Like, I studied 90s New York bombing. You know what I'm saying? Like, before and I was always respectful of people. If I had beefs, I would try and reach out to that person right away and settle it however it's going to go. You know what I mean? I would not shy away from that shit. Also, like, learn your history. Like, try and get good. Like, you're not the man. Everybody that's came before you, like, I'm so humbled listening to the stories that these other writers that came on this podcast tell. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I don't understand why there aren't more young dudes like that. Like, I'm not even young anymore. I'm old now. But like, if there's anything I could tell to like my like 16-year-old self, it's just like, be humble, and study, and like really like keep drawing and trying to learn. Even if you want to be like a bomber or whatever, don't just try and copy. Everybody just tries to like, be like copy these. They don't want to bite their style, but yet they want to bite their whole life. You know what I'm saying? They got it all wrong. Like, basically, if you're coming to New York, stay humble, learn your history, don't go over people, and try and get good at graffiti so that your contribution matters. One good fill-in is worth more than 100 shitty fill-ins, and I'm not going to drop any names or diss anybody outright or whatever, but if you're listening to this podcast and you think I'm talking about you, I'm probably talking about you.
Yeah, and then also, again, big shout out to CH, because that dude was as friendly and welcoming to me and Z
Bro,
and
I'd have him over at my mom's crib right now, face tats and all. You know what I
man,
mean? Because
I'm so bummed that he doesn't live in New York. Because if he did, I would try to see him as much as possible because that dude is just an uplifting human being
yeah,
and the
he should
way
do a podcast, bro. He could be like the Graffiti Joe Rogan or some shit.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
and then the way that he man, the way that he lives his life and how he talks and everything is just amazing, bro. So shout
It's
out to
Graffiti
him.
Joe Pesci, bro. He said,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Like, just I can't tell you. Like, my number one favorite interview from Graffiti was Jay on Hot 97. I don't know if you guys ever heard that, but
Hmm.
legendary, super funny. Or the old school PJ interview. You know, most gangster shit I've heard. Like, there's a ton of amazing interviews out there, right? But CH actually, like, I was like, damn, I really got to follow that up. Like, that thing was good, man. The stories that he has to tell, like. And I don't know. So yeah, I don't want to make the whole podcast about him, but I just, like I said, I want to give people their flowers while they're here. I
Of
saw it.
course,
I
of
saw the
course.
post he made, right before Kez 5 passed away. A lot of people were like, people who bombed with him, just, one post here, one post there, maybe a little shout out. Cause, I could gather from a distance that man had a lot of demons that he was battling throughout his life, and he beefed with friends of mine, you know what I mean? So like, um, I know that he's a controversial figure, but within graffiti, you cannot not acknowledge his contributions. You know what I'm saying? So like,
Absolutely.
definitely shout people out while they're going through their thing. And CH was one of the only motherfuckers that I saw actually do that. Like while Kez was alive, put out this whole long thing. Big up in him. And that's not just to state on the record. That's not dick riding either. Like giving a man his flowers is not dick riding. Like you can show respect and not be on some jock shit. You know what I'm saying? Like and just don't shy away from that. So and
Absolutely,
him
man.
even him addressing the whole like out of towner coming to New York, New Yorkers not feeling that. Like I like listening to that because I've dealt with that myself. People being like, "Yo, you're not from here," or whatever. You know what I mean? But it's whatever, man. Like you are who you are. You got to be proud of who you are. If I could go, if I could go back and be a little baby and choose where I'm from, yeah, I'd like to be from somewhere in New York. But it is what it is, man. Like I still appreciate all the experiences I've been through, and I've been able to link up with some of the most legit New York City writers. I mean, shit, man, like ZE and Rush. The list goes on, bro. Like of people that I've linked up with who and then also out of towners, seeing what BTM did to New York in 2009, 2010, that was dope for the whole culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, for sure, dude. 100% everything you're saying. What have you been up to now? What's your life like now, and what are your future plans? And in terms of raising some money for your cause and all that stuff.
Oh, good question, man. So I owe $60,000 in restitution, and I cannot get off parole until I pay it back. They've extended my parole I completed 7. They extended it another 4 years, and they told me if you don't pay back the 60 grand within that 4 years, we're going to extend it again, and it's going to go on indefinitely until you pay it back. And so that is priority number one is paying back that restitution. Now, I told you I went to school for business. I had to do that to make myself more employable. My plan was to get a job and just slowly work it off and pay off the 60 grand like it's student loan debt or something, But COVID happened, and I've kind of holed up in this studio. I spend every day, sometimes 12 hours a day in my studio. I make paintings. I'm trying to get better at painting. I'm trying to learn as much as I can. I'm reading about art. I'm listening to a ton of other podcasts and artist lectures, really trying to get to the core of a lot of the issues that contemporary painters deal with. So I want to refine my painting practice while also trying to deal with making that restitution money. My plan right now, I'm making some prints, and I don't want to like talk about the details about the prints because, like I said, I made a whole film based around these prints. But I'm going to try and sell them for $100 a pop, and I'm going to try and sell 600 of them because then I'd have 60 grand to pay off the restitution. So if someone was to buy one of these prints, they're both getting a piece of my art, but they're also making a donation or a contribution towards this end. A lot of people are like, yo, when you were going through your shit, why didn't you start a GoFundMe? Back then, it really wasn't cool to be all like out there public talking about your shit. You know, you kind of just took it on the head. If you caught a case, you just handle it like by yourself. And, you know, I wish that I would have tried to get money like some way, but I just didn't want to ask for help, you know? And like, still to this day, I don't want to ask people for help without giving them something back, which is why I came up with this idea, you know? So like, when I do drop the video, I hope that everybody goes and watches that, you know, and then I hope that people buy the prints. I hope to get off parole. And, you know, once I get off parole, I'd like to travel internationally. You know, I haven't left the country since I was 19 years old. I've only left the country with the exception of going to Canada because it's like Toronto's an hour away from me. You know, I used to go before I had any charges. I used to go all the time. Unfortunately, I can never go back there, but like, I would like to travel to other parts of the world because I feel like that's a super valuable experience. You know, just continue to kind of focus on refining my art practice. I don't have any other concrete plans right now because the funny thing about being on parole is you can't plan too far in advance. You have to have like 10 different plans at any time because I could get off the phone with you guys and I could be driving home. Shit, I shouldn't even say this on here, but I'm gonna handle it like within the next week. But I got an outstanding you know, speeding ticket or whatever, so they're gonna put a warrant out for my arrest. And the minute that happens, you know what I'm saying, I could get locked up. So like, I gotta go take care of that. But like, shit could happen at any moment. I could go into a bar just to pick up a takeout order, and somebody could start some shit, and you know, you get into a scuffle, and next thing you know, you're locked up for a year. That's the reality that I live with daily. So I have like 10 different plans about what I'm going to do. I don't know which one's going to stick. I don't know which one's going to be the one that goes. You know, a big part of my plan for the past several years was just finishing up, you know, my undergraduate degree. That's now completed. Next step is, you know, sell these prints, get off of parole. And then after that, you know, I'd like to just have a comfortable life. I want to be able to support an art practice and make contributions to, you know, other people. And, yeah, I mean, that just generally that's kind of my life goal. I'd like to, you know, continue to also like work on my own, I guess like my own like mentality, my own, just daily life, you know, always trying to be a better person, trying to be a more understanding person. And, but those are my goals. They're fairly general.
Perfect, man. Yeah.
No, dude, thank you so much for your stories. Like you were saying before, there's a few podcasts out there, like you mentioned, like JA or PJ, that really stand out. And I'm not even kidding. I think this is one of them. This is very informative. We covered a lot of topics that I think a lot of people need to hear. Dude, thank you so much for coming on, taking the time out to do this. Like, honestly.
Yo, honestly, I appreciate you guys too, man. You guys are doing something really cool here. You got a wave going. You know, it's big, man. I'm excited to see what you cook up. I'm excited to listen to Lions. You know, I made it about halfway through NM's so far. You know what I mean? I listen to everybody else's. So I'm definitely going to stay tuned. And yeah, you guys are doing it right, though. So big shout out to you.
Amazing, man. Yo, thank you so much, bro. I hope to be able to, we were talking, if it's okay with you, we wanted to eventually somehow make it out to Buffalo. We just want to like see your space, maybe shoot a couple photos or something like that. And then, you know, like if you're ever free, we can make that happen. And then, yeah, man, let us know.
Yo, we got you when you come through. You know what I mean? We're very hospitable here. And yeah, you guys are definitely welcome. So we'll be in touch.
Sweet, man. I'm going to set something up then. I'll text you.
All right. Peace, guys.
All right. Peace, yo. Peace, everyone. Fucking hurt. Later.
Peace.